Okay, so I am here in the fiction section, and I am going to look for any books that are hardcover without a dust jacket. So, talked about dust jackets earlier this week. Somebody asked me, why do books have dust jackets? And I'll talk about that in the end of the video. But a dust jacket is going to be a book. This is a dust jacket, and it covers the hardcover of the book. So I was curious if there are any hardcover books that are case laminate, so without a dust jacket. Let's see what we can find. It was harder than I thought it would be to find books that are hardcover without dust jackets, but here's one that I found, Justine, and it is by the publisher Tin House, which is a small independent publisher. They actually started as an imprint of a larger publisher, Bloomsbury, but now they are independent. And so here's a book that they've published. It's a standard book size, but it isn't very long. Let's see how many pages. So it's 134 pages with text. There's a couple more pages here at the end. And what's interesting is there's illustrations in it, which is also unusual for a novel. And then this black insert. So there's art in here. That's very unusual for a novel. But this particular publisher is a little bit more avant-garde, let's say. So they're doing work that's experimental and pushing the boundaries. So that explains why they have a book that is a little bit different than most books that you would find, most novels you would find. Here's another hardcover book without a dust jacket, Rules for a Night by Ethan Hawke. And yes, it's like, well, is it that Ethan Hawke? And it is that Ethan Hawke. It's a story of a knight who thinks he won't return from battle, writing a letter to his children to leave a record of all he knows. So it's it looks like it's a story or a fable, maybe. I haven't read it, but it's published by Knopf, which is owned by Random House. So it's a very different kind of book and a very different kind of design, very gift-like. So yeah, I can see why they would design it in this way to continue the theme of the book. And as you can see, it's really loosely, it's in fiction here, but I'm not sure. I'd have to read it to know for sure how novel-like it is. It could just, it does have chapters, so anyway, it is shelved in fiction as a letter, so it's a mass market size. To find a lot more like this. This is what I was picturing when I thought of fiction or novels that are hardcover. So this is a classic Christmas, a collection of stories and poems, and so these are all actually Louisa May Alcott, Charles Dickens, Hans Christian Andersen. These are all public domain, so there's no rights or royalties here that anyone had to deal with. So these are all stories in the public domain that are published as a Christmas book. And it's put out by, Thomas Nelson. Okay, so they're a large Christian publisher, and I would have to look them up, but I think they're also owned by one of the big 5 publishers. So this is more of a gift. Again, this is a gift book that you would give at Christmas time, and it's going to have this hardcover without a dust jacket. I wasn't finding that many books that were hardcover without dust jackets. I started looking at books that were just different in shape and size. So most of the books are going to be a trade paperback. So this is trade paperback size. So it's a paperback the size of a hardcover, right? And then you've got books that are, let's see, mass market size, right? So this is the mass market size. So this particular novel kind of stood out because it's square, and I don't think I've ever seen a square novel. So this was very interesting. It's called If You Kept a Record of Sins by Andrea Bahani. It is translated from Italian, so that may be one reason for the unique design. And it also has these flaps. It's paperback, but it has the flaps, which I think is really cool. And it's published by Archipelago Books, which is actually, according to the credits page, they're distributed by Penguin Random House, so that means they're an independent publisher because they're not owned by Penguin Random House. And it's a translation because it's published by arrangement with the Italian Literary Agency. So that's another reason for this different format. And I kind of like this format. It's different. I imagine it goes along with this particular story, and I'm curious if books in Europe have this kind of format. So it may be that they're using a format from how other countries might do it, because these trade paperback and mass market are normal for the American market, but they may not be normal or used in all over the world. So I just thought that was interesting. One of the things I forgot to check on here was this particular book is 200 pages, because I'm always curious about page count. So this one is a little over 200 pages, 202 I think, and that is also something to keep in mind if you look at how long your novel is. I imagine if this were a 6x9, it would be pretty thin, so they'd have to beef up the page count a little bit, maybe add more space on a page, possibly. This one is in the closer to the 250 page range, which is a bit of a sweet spot. 315 pages, and it's got a lot of so you've got the name of the author and their years that they were alive, so that's going to beef up the page count of the book. But again, this is a gift book, so you kind of want the page count to be beefed up, right? You want people to feel that they got something worth some money. And again, they're not paying royalties or anything to the authors, so they can afford to do a little more on the design side. This one, I imagine, is a small word count, so again, it's a little bit smaller than a mass market, but it's not long. And then they also add in these pictures and quotes, so that's also going to up the page count. And the page count on this one, over 172 pages. So again, in a smaller book with closer to 172, almost 200 pages, about 30 pages shy. But that one they've added some things to kind of beef that up as well. I thought if there was going to be anywhere that I would find books that are hardcover without dust jackets, it would be in fantasy or science fiction. And I did, but it was a bit of a look. So the first one I see is A Game of Thrones, by George R.R. Martin. And this is a leather-bound edition, but it's a gift, obviously for gift giving. I would love to open this up and see what the text looks like inside, because I imagine it's tiny, because I think Game of Thrones is, yeah, here it is in mass market. So if you look at, this is the book with quite tiny text that they have fit into this book. All right, it's the same width, so it's a similar page count, but it is a smaller page trim size. But, so it may be still the same size, so that'd be interesting to see. One more, also Game of Thrones. Here we have, so then they have the same books, but in big leather-bound editions. And this is definitely hardcover, not leather-bound. It's a pretend leather. It feels soft, but it's not leather. This is definitely case-bound laminate. Again, a gift edition. Game of Thrones. This one's A Storm of Swords, which is from the series. Ooh, a special foreword by Neil Gaiman, $40. Also illustrated Look at the text on this. Beautiful illustrations. So that's quite a book. It was probably fun to design. Casebound laminate. So that was very interesting to see, basically, that there really aren't novels in any genre in a bookstore that are hard casebound laminate without a dust jacket. We found a couple, but now there may be some online, because again, what's for sale online is much bigger than what's for sale in a bookstore, and probably 80 to 90% of what's in a bookstore is by the top 5 publishers, and they're not publishing novels in casebound laminate unless it's a gift edition. And basically everything, almost everything we saw was a gift edition for that book. Justine, a novel, that was probably also a gift edition, with the fact that it had the illustrations inside and had the black pages that separated each chapter and had the art. So it would be interesting to look up and see if Justine, a novel, is available in any other format. But Tin House is an independent publisher, and a lot of times independent publishers will take risks, or they'll be a little more creative with what they're designing, just because they can be. If they can be, they will do that. Though sometimes bigger houses will be more creative in what they're designing, depending on the author and the book. So there aren't any hard and fast rules. It's just something to see, something that's interesting. But Rules for a Night is definitely a gift bound, a gift item, and a unique binding. It's small because it's not very long, and it's a letter, basically a letter, fictional, but it's a letter. And so that one was in the hardcover. The one I thought we'd see the most of was the one like A Christmas Carol. It was called A Christmas Carol, and it had all the Christmas stories from Louisa May Alcott and Charles Dickens, and those are all public domain stories. And actually, if you go, especially at Christmas time, if you go to the bargain section of a bookstore, especially a Barnes & Noble, you will find those. They're pretty, they're illustrated, they're hardcover generally. They may or may not have dust jackets, but they're kind of, there's a series, and they're all fairy tales, say, and they all have a certain look, illustrated look. Those are, again, public domain, and they're gift, and you're going to only see them around gift time. You'll also see them sometimes in children's sections, because they'll call them fairy tales. And the bargain book printers and bargain book arms of the publishers will sometimes put those out directly for sale. So that's kind of where you'll see hard casebound books that are novels. But generally, just in general, the standard way that novels are published is in hardcover. So you're going to have the hardcover with a dust jacket, all right? And it's going to be a 6x9 in hardcover. It may be 5x8 or in that range, but you're not going to get much smaller when you have a new hardcover. Then after a novel has been out for a year or more and sold well, generally, now these timelines are changing now, but generally about a year or so, give or take, you'll have it in paperback. And this is a trade paperback. And it's trade paperback because it's similar in size to the hardcover. Okay, this one is actually closer to the 5x8 size. Looks like it's 5.5 by 8. So that's a trade paperback. And then this is mass market. And mass market is this small, what you would see in a newsstand or at, like, used to be Woolworths, now Walmart, but you'll see mass market everywhere. So some of the books that we saw in today's video are close to a mass market size. Then we saw the ones by Game of Thrones that were definitely leather-like. I don't think either one of them was, I know the hardcover casebound was not leather. It was made to look like leather, and I doubt that the other one that was wrapped, I don't think that was real leather either. But it's interesting to see, and of course, that's going to be something that people will want to give as a gift. So those were the ones that we saw today. So if you are publishing a novel, if you're self-publishing it, then I encourage you to publish it in paperback. That's going to be your print-on-demand paperback is going to be the least expensive option for you. You can do it in hardcover also. It's going to cost higher to print, and then you'll have a higher cost. So look and see what other books in your genre, and if they're hardcover or paperback, look and see how they're being priced to determine your price of your print-on-demand book. If you're doing ebook, none of this even matters. So why look at dust jackets anyway? So someone asked me earlier in the week, why are there dust jackets? I hate dust jackets. I always take them off of my books. I don't take them off. I like dust jackets. And as you know, I like this look, and it protects the book more than, and now this one's pretty because I like cream. And look at how, so you've got the cream book with the red, see the red, and it's kind of shiny, all right? So if you want to have all of the plainer covers on your bookshelf, then yes, take off the dust jacket. It also makes a good bookmark when you have, if you are needing a bookmark, you can use the flaps to help you save your place in the book. But dust jackets came along because originally, when books were first printed, they weren't even bound. They were just wrapped. The pages are just wrapped, and the person took them home and sewed them together. So they weren't originally bound. But then eventually in the 1800s, books were wrapped because they were leather bound and often had gilt lettering on the covers and gilt pages, and so the dust jacket was kind of a packaging wrap kind of thing. And again, it was for protection. It was thrown away. It was just paper. It was thrown away or reused, or however people did with paper back then. Then in the let's say late 1800s, books started being sold in stalls outside. They were sold outside. They still are in many places of the world. They're sold outside at tables, or they were in at the market or in wagons. And so then the dust jacket was, again, continued to be a protector of the book. And then in the 30s and 40s, with advertising and technology, created color inks that could be printed onto paper. And there were so many more books for the masses that then books needed to stand out. And so then you started to see the paper covers that were plain and meant to be thrown away then started being printed on in color to advertise the book or other books even. There are some book covers from that time period that advertise other books or other things. And those were still intended to be thrown away because by that point the technology was such that it wasn't that expensive to print on the paper and throw it away. It was like newsprint, right? You just throw it away. And then over time, the artwork of book covers has evolved and has exploded, and it's become its own art design. And actually, speaking of book covers, if you are self-publishing a book, please hire a book cover designer to design your book cover. Book cover design is very different from graphic design, and graphic designers often do not have the experience to create a compelling book cover. And if you start to look at book covers, you may be able to start to see that. And so if you have a self-published book that you want to self-publish, look at books in your genre, look at those covers, start to collect the covers that you like, at least 10 say, and then when you find a book designer, ask them what kind of books they design. Is it fantasy or is it self-help? Because those are two different kinds of design as well. And if you can, you want to find someone who has designed the same kind of book that you are publishing, so that you know that they understand, again, the look of that particular book, because a fantasy novel looks very different than a self-help book, as it should, because the cover tells the reader what's in the book. I'm not going to get into cover design, like we could really dive in, but I'm not going to do that right now. But I am just going to say cover design is now an artwork, is a special kind of art, and the dust jackets are generally expected to be kept on the book now. But if you don't like dust jackets, throw them away. You don't need to keep them. All right, so that was this week's episode. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe and do all the things and get all the notifications, and share this with anybody who is writing a novel. They might be interested to see this. I'm sure there are plenty of people out there writing novels. If you have any questions or you want to suggest something to look for at the bookstore, please put it in the comments below. Thanks.